Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating paradox about the modern world we live in, based on Jonah Goldberg's brilliant analysis, Suicide of the West. We're going to look at a massive clash. On one side, we have the incredible, totally unnatural systems that built our modern prosperity, and on the other, the ancient, primitive programming hardwired right into our own brains. It's a crazy story about wealth, tribalism, and honestly, just how fragile our civilization really is.
So, I want you to start off by asking yourself this kind of jarring question. Why, in literally the wealthiest, most technologically advanced, and most peaceful era in all of human history, does our society feel so incredibly fractured? Right? I mean, we are surrounded by unprecedented prosperity, yet we seem completely irresistibly drawn to anger, division, and tribalism. To understand why we're acting like this today, we actually need to rewind the clock. Way back.
I absolutely love this thought experiment from the source material. Imagine an alien observer keeping a log of humanity. Say they visit Earth 250,000 years ago. They'd write down upright nomadic apes foraging and fighting. Then they come back 100,000 years ago, check their notes, and literally just write, no change. The vast, overwhelming majority of human history is incredibly static. Even 10,000 years ago, with the dawn of basic agriculture and mud shelters, daily reality for almost everyone was just backbreaking labor and crushing poverty. But then, just 300 years ago, which is basically a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, everything suddenly changes. And this brilliantly illustrates that sudden change. For practically all of human history, humanity lived on the equivalent of maybe $1 to $3 a day, just a flat, dead line of grinding poverty. Then, boom, around the year 1700, human prosperity just explodes upward. Goldberg calls this explosive anomaly of wealth creation the miracle. It's arguably the most important chart in human history because it shows that we essentially stumbled through a portal into a completely different world.
That portal was what we call the Lockean Revolution. It was this profound shift in ideas that suddenly championed individual rights and private property. We essentially flipped a cognitive switch. Before this, the natural state of mankind was exactly what you'd expect: poverty, violence, tribalism, and an early death. That's how humans naturally exist. But the miracle? Wealth, human rights, democracy, the radical idea that individuals are actually sovereign, that is a completely unnatural environment compared to our historical baseline. We built a super novel environment for ourselves. Which brings us to Section 1, our tribal human nature, or as we can call it, the outdated hardware.
Because here is the absolute crux of the problem. We live in this shiny new, unnatural miracle, but our brains, they're still running on seriously outdated hardware. We're carrying the exact same genetic programming as those nomadic apes from 250,000 years ago. Evolution just doesn't work fast enough to adapt to a 300-year-old economic miracle. To prove this, we can look at the work of evolutionary psychologists like Paul Bloom. He did these fascinating experiments on infants and found that babies actually have an innate moral sense. They prefer to look at puppets acting nicely rather than mean puppets. But crucially, they also show deep, hardwired tribalism. They inherently distrust strangers and strongly prefer people who sound like them. Distrusting the other isn't something we're taught. It's preloaded survival software straight from the savannah. In fact, anthropologists have identified a whole list of traits shared by literally all humans everywhere. Just look at these universal people traits: ethnocentrism, in-group bias, a hunger for status and prestige, a deep instinct for revenge. What this tells us is that our political ideologies are actually downstream of our human nature. Deep down, we are fundamentally hardwired for status and coalition building, not for living in some massive, anonymous, globalized society.
And we really need to completely dispel that romantic myth of the noble savage. The idea that before civilization, we all lived in peaceful harmony. The archaeological record is brutally clear on this. In primitive, small-scale societies, roughly 1/3 of people died from raids and fights. Warfare wasn't some invention of modern states. Chronic warfare, ambush tactics, extreme violence, that was the absolute norm of human existence. And this brings us to a really harsh historical reality. Atrocities like torture and slavery were universal norms across the globe for thousands of years. They were completely natural to early human societies. What is actually unnatural is their abolition. Think about it. Slavery began to disappear precisely where industrial capitalism appeared first. From a purely historical and economic standpoint, the liberal democratic order and the modern free market made slavery fundamentally incompatible with progress. The free market demands free labor. Ultimately, the completely unnatural system of capitalism helped destroy the ancient, perfectly natural institution of slavery. Let's move on to Section 2, the unnatural free market.
This leads us to a major friction point. Capitalism and democracy are essentially highly advanced, unnatural software programs trying to run on our deeply tribal, outdated hardware. Let's contrast how we interact. In a state of nature, if I want your apple, I hit you with a rock and take it. Violence is natural, it's zero-sum, and it breeds deep tribalism. Trade, on the other hand, is mutually beneficial. It builds trust. The free market suppresses our tribal instincts by forcing us to do something incredibly unnatural. It forces us to treat strangers as equals. It makes us see the other not as an enemy to be killed, but as a customer to be served. It's a brilliantly designed system for mass cooperation.
Now for Section 3, the Romantic Rebellion.
So here's the fatal flaw of this massive, cooperative, wealth-generating system. It simply doesn't feel natural. It just doesn't provide us with a sense of deep tribal meaning. And that friction sparks what the source calls the Romantic Rebellion. Now, to be clear, we aren't talking about Romanticism as an art or poetry movement here. We're defining it through a biological and psychological lens. Romanticism is a primal, emotional rebellion against the iron cage of modernity. It's that nagging feeling in your gut that our unnatural, complex world is somehow inauthentic, rigged, or oppressive, and that we desperately need to return to some imagined, harmonious tribal past. It's essentially the inner primitive crying out for meaning.
To see just how seductive this tribal pull really is, listen to this incredible observation from Benjamin Franklin way back in 1753. He noted that European colonists who were taken in by Native American tribes almost never wanted to return to Western civilization. Why? Because the tribal life speaks directly to our DNA. It offers immediate belonging, clear status, and community. Maintaining the unnatural Western way of life, with its contracts, individual responsibilities, and abstract rules, takes constant, exhausting work. Giving into the tribe? That's easy.
Which brings us to Section 4, the threat of ingratitude. So the crucial point is how this plays out in our society right now. The author argues that when we look at the rise of intense political tribalism today, and we're talking about both left-wing identity politics and right-wing populism here, we're actually looking at modern symptoms of this exact same romantic rebellion. These movements are driven by a deeply human urge to reject the cold, unnatural rules of the miracle and retreat into the warm, emotionally satisfying embrace of a tribe that tells us, hey, we're the good guys and they are the bad guys. And this romantic rebellion breeds a dangerous ingratitude, best illustrated by the fable of the golden goose. We all know the story, right? A farmer finds a magic goose laying golden eggs, but instead of caring for this miracle, he feels entitled. Driven by hubris, rage, and a demand for more right now, he cuts the goose open, only to find absolutely nothing. The miracle is lost forever. The source material warns that we're acting a lot like that farmer. Out of intellectual hubris and tribal rage, we are threatening to unravel the very systems, the Lockean miracle, that create all our wealth and freedom in the first place. When we stop being grateful, and we stop doing the hard work to maintain civilization, we invite corruption. And I want to redefine corruption for you here. We usually think of it as, politicians taking bribes. But in this context, corruption means something much deeper. It is entropy. It's the natural process of decay and rot. It's what happens to iron when you leave it out in the rain. It rusts. Nature's always trying to take back what is hers. When a civilization takes its miracles for granted and stops defending its unnatural achievements, human nature simply rushes right back in. There is a brilliant mini-narrative that perfectly captures the struggle between the unnatural miracle and our natural tribal instincts. It's the opening scene of The Godfather. The Undertaker goes to the police, representing the cold, abstract American legal system when his daughter is attacked. But the system just gives the attackers a slap on the wrist. So what does he do? He turns his back on the rule of law and goes to the mafia boss. He seeks the ancient natural world of blood, loyalty, and tribal justice. He actively chooses the tribe over the state. Now what's really interesting here is the hidden symbolism the author points out. The Undertaker's name is Amerigo Bonacera, translated from Italian that literally means "Good night, America." When he asks Don Corleone to be his friend, he is formally rejecting the Lockean miracle. He's surrendering the unnatural, hard-won achievements of modern civilization for the emotionally satisfying but ultimately brutal reality of human nature. And that brings us to the ultimate question we are left with. Civilization is not some guaranteed trajectory. It's a daily choice. It is a constant uphill battle to maintain an unnatural environment against the powerful gravity of our own evolutionary programming. The tribal drumbeats of human nature are always there, just waiting to reclaim the miracle. So the question is, Will we be grateful enough for what we have to do the hard work of keeping it, or will we just let nature take it back? I'll leave you to think about that.